Go.
Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, we continue our celebration of Women's History Month by featuring one of the most highly respected and accomplished women from the world of radio. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Most of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I place music execs in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, and say hello to your friends, and even make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try our best to address as many of those as possible during the interview. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address speakers and attendees. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this free. I want to thank First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. So let's get the program started. In today's host seat, we welcome Marcus Peterzell. Marcus is an industry leader in entertainment marketing who's successfully built and led award-winning agency teams both independently and with Omnicom, one of the largest advertising holding companies. Most recently, Marcus was a partner and EVP of entertainment at Ketchum PR, as well as co-lead of their VR practice, winning dozens of accolades, including 4 Cannes Lions and a PRSA Silver Anvil Award. In 2019, Marcus launched Passion Point Collective, a new boutique agency that provides brands and next-generation entertainment marketing services and solutions. Marcus has a unique background that includes stints as production executive for over 20 TV series and specials, including the first cable strip to feature Larry David and Joy Behar on Lifetime, and the first authorized music documentaries for Emmy Award-winning series Biography for A&E. He has created dozens of award-winning branded entertainment campaigns for brands such as Gatorade, StubHub, Mount Sinai, Nestle, Pernod Ricard, MasterCard, and CES. Marcus has unparalleled music relationships that began with him guiding Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees The Cure to their first #1 album and single in the US. He went on to create over 90 breakthrough music campaigns for artists including Ariana Grande, Little Big Town, Bon Jovi, and Sarah Bareilles. In 2011, he created Ketchum Films, where he oversaw 9 brand-funded feature films, more than any other PR or ad agency, including Seed for HPE, Farmland, directed by Oscar winner James Mole, and A Fighting Chance, directed by Oscar winner Morgan Neville for Samsung. Marcus produced the short-form video for Gillette Trading Places, featuring Roger Federer and Lionel Messi, the most watched tennis video in YouTube history. He also married HPE with feature film Star Trek Beyond and created the launch of Independence Day Resurgence for Hershey's. Wow. Welcome, Marcus. What a resume. And joining him as today's featured guest is Alyssa Pollock. Alyssa is Executive Vice President and Global Music Marketing and Strategy at iHeartMedia. In her role, she leverages her 25 plus years of music industry experience to negotiate partnerships for leading brands and artists using iHeartMedia's extensive data, music, and consumer insights. Working closely with brands to create their targeted music strategies, including custom content, brand ambassadors, tour integrations, music licensing, fan engagement, podcasts, and live events. She's helmed multifaceted programs on behalf of brands including Macy's, P&G, HBO, Chevrolet, Taco Bell, Budweiser, Google, and artists including Shawn Mendes, Billie Eilish, Keith Urban, Demi Lovato, Fall Out Boy, Florida Georgia Line, Marshmello, John Legend, Jonas Brothers, Melissa Etheridge, darn woman, Mike Shinoda, Miley Cyrus, Nicky Jam, Big Sean, The Chainsmokers, Tim McGraw, and many more. All while working very closely with iHeartMedia's national programming platforms team to create national research, multi-platform artist marketing strategies, and to discover and develop new artists early in their careers. Alyssa oversees Mediabase, Rate the Music, Test All Media, and M-Score's domestic and international music ventures, which are services providing vital airplay data and in-depth analytical tools for radio stations, the music industry, and media professionals. Her team spearheads affiliate and artist relations with premier networks for more than 5,000 affiliates, digital and podcast teams, and internationally through broadcast partnerships. In 2014, she was named Billboard's most powerful women in the music list. She continues to serve on the board of Music Cares and is vice chair of Musicians on Call and the executive board of Music and Entertainment Committee for City of Hope. In 2006, she created and continues to chair the Taste of Hope event, which became one of the music industry's biggest events and to date has raised over $6 million for City of Hope. In 2015, she was Jet Set Magazine's first featured entrepreneur for her charity work-based brand programs and was the honoree for TJ Martell's 16th annual Family Day. In 2014, in a partnership with Musicians on Call, she created the Jason Pollack Bedside Performance Program in honor of her late father, which brings the healing power of music to thousands of patients every year. Please welcome these two amazing guests to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, Marcus.
Hey, everyone. You know, I think we're going to have to change up the program here. Alyssa, let's get rid of the corporate life. Let's just form Pollack and Peterzell, and let's just move on. What do you think?
Man, I think we always had Pollack and Peterzell wherever we were, so I think it's okay.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks everyone for joining. And thanks, Tom, for bringing everyone together. I've been watching this series for kind of since the inception. It's really been great. And I just love what I was watching the one with Merck and looking at the chat box and seeing so many people connected. And even through Alyssa's posts, I saw so many names and they were like, wait a minute, it just, even before we got on the screen, we connected with so many people, which I think is going to be a theme of what we're doing. So it's really great. So I'd love to start out and just talking about the transformation of radio and Alyssa's career and how they've merged. And, you know, my first question, which I scratched my head, and one of the names that popped up on your Facebook was like Lorraine Caruso randomly. And it brought back a memory. I'm a TVT back in the Stone Age. And it's like my first week, and we've got the Cannell's record in NEW, and I'm going to be like a big shot. I call her up. I'm like, how's that record doing? She's like, retail isn't really reacting. We called 3 record stores. The phones haven't been coming in. I'm like, huh? What? And next thing I know, we're about to lose a record because of record stores, if anyone remembers those, and call-ins. My God, how everything has changed and transformed. So my question is, in the 27 years you've stayed with iHeart, as radio's transformed and you transform, has it been like a race? Has the radio been ahead of you and you've had to catch up? Or you've been ahead of the trends and radio's had to catch up with you? What is your secret sauce?
It's probably a little bit of both of that, right? You know, I think that I have been super fortunate in being in one place it's actually 27 years, including my internship at Z100, and is the only job I've ever had. So it's been an interesting perspective to be able to start here when we really were just a terrestrial radio company, but along the way be able to be with the company as it grew and emerged. So as a result of that, I was able to actually grow and emerge with it. And I was definitely one of those people who always had to raise my hand for anything new. So I would look for new trends or listen to new company priorities, and I'll be like, I'll take that, I'll do that. And so I was able to really gain a lot of experience in things outside of just the traditional radio part, which was really cool. And helped me build a perspective that I don't think you could even recreate now, right? Because what I always think about is the fact that when I started, the company was so much smaller than it is now. I've actually been able to be very intrapreneurial, I call it, which means I could be entrepreneurial inside of a company environment. And I was very fortunate to have bosses that were always supportive, and they understood my personality. And I would come and say, hey, I've got a crazy idea. Why don't we? And a lot of times they would say, hey, go for it, you know, figure it out. So I think that as the company evolved, I would try and keep up with what were the priorities of the company and what was the next thing. But I think also in many ways, being inside the company from such an early start, I was able to also raise my hand or create things within the company that became a next thing for us. And I think that's been a good run for me.
So what is the mix now, at least for you or your perspective in radio, on the people quotient versus the data quotient? The streaming world is so much about algorithms, and it's almost like, you know, people will joke, good luck, try to get someone from Spotify on the phone. It's all about the numbers, but in the radio world, there are still people. And for you, you're such a people person. So how do those two mix?
Well, I think music is art, right? And it is at the end of the day subjective, right? I am a data geek through and through. And that's been a really interesting part of my experience at iHeart, because for anyone that's on here and is familiar with Mediabase, which is the music monitoring system that I work with that oversees all the airplay in the country, it was on floppy disk when I first started, right? And now, you know, we have access to, through our proprietary data or partner data, we have data from every possible platform there is, right? So whether that's radio, streaming, social, digital, and so on. And so, you know, data is still a super important part for radio programmers as well. They're looking at all of that and they're measuring, you know, how different songs are performing. But I think what definitely sets radio apart, to your point, from just, you know, regular data itself is the art and the ability to hear a song. Not every song actually is led by data, right? Sometimes there are just songs that people are going to listen to and go, I think my audience wants to hear that. So I think radio still has that unique ability to curate playlists better than anyone else, know what listeners like to hear, but also obviously we're big in using the data to help us inform and make as best educated decisions as we can.
Amazing. And what was kind of the transformation? It's interesting we're having this panel at this transition period with COVID as the vaccines are increasing and people can see the light of day, but we'll never forget March when it first started. And I remember for me, as I worked during the day, I still listen to radio and I keep my local station in Westchester on the air. And what made it so real, there's lots of facts and figures in newspapers, but it wasn't as real. But on the radio station, they just announced, they said, we're going to be doing all the shifts. We've had to furlough all our DJs except for 2. And I was like almost in tears. It just brought it so real. I'm like, that's it? They're just off the air? And it really was, you know, just a personal reaction on the reality of COVID. How did it affect your world when it hit?
My personal world, I mean, you know, it was interesting because doing a lot of the brand artist partnerships and the content creation and things like that, you know, it was an interesting pivot to having to do things a new way and get creative. And we kind of put together this 10 a.m. call that we have now with a lot of the different leaders in the company, from programming to marketing and you know, otherwise. And we brainstorm, and you know, we were able to do a great job of figuring out how to still reach the listeners, you know, make the brands happy, find creative ways to showcase artists. So thankfully, it turned into a very positive thing. And I think we've had a very successful year with that. But I think that for radio in general, you know, as soon as you asked me that, I instantly thought of the fact that radio still is one of the most trusted sources, right? And the radio personalities are considered more friends than anything else. And I think during a time of crisis, you know, when I look back at 9/11 and I think about listening to Z100 and the offices and then being able to actually see things and give, you know, up to the minute updates on that, and all the different big things that have happened in the world, there's no question that those big tentpole moments are the times where people instantly turn back to radio, because it's that companionship, it's that trusted source of information. And it was no different during COVID. Elvis Duran, ended up extending his show an extra hour because, people were so interested in listening to what he had to say, and the way that, it's that half informational thing, but also the fact that, radio personalities are just people too, right? And they were going through a lot of the same things that their listeners were. And it was that place where, again, people were able to tune in and from a human perspective, kind of feel connected to other people that could talk about what they were going through and connect in that way. So I think that was also a very important thing for radio during COVID.
Yeah, you talk about the music marketing piece, and it was crazy that about, I don't know, maybe April or May, an article came out and it was quoting some of the entertainment marketing agencies, like us and like you, about how things were increasing in business. And obviously the touring side for the talent agencies was, went just down, 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 and down, and yet the partnerships were still there. And I think everyone who's in the, music marketing business, we kind of had to reinvent ourselves. In March, there was some new leadership at one of my clients for years, Bowers and Wilkins, where we gave audio equipment. We had partnerships with Sony ATV, Hollywood Records, Universal Nashville, and we give them equipment, and then we capture content in the offices as kind of like a barter. So then they're all like, our offices are closed, Marcus, and we don't know when they'll open. So here we have to execute a partnership based on going to people's offices that we can't get into. So quickly it was like, well, we'll do artist live streams and you'll FedEx them equipment there. Like, we had no choice but to pivot. But I was so surprised and happy to see how much the music marketing business had grown. But, it was funny, you and I are going to talk about part of our job is to find the new artists, and anyone can write a big check for Pink, anyone can write a big check for Miley Cyrus. But when it comes to the new artists, there is that human factor of who's going to be new. And so many of the brands do count on all of us to say who will be new. But I'll make two quick points with one video, which Tom will cue up in a minute, which was we were talking to one of our brands, and we shouldn't mention Kleenex, sorry. We should have mentioned names, and they wanted an artist for under 100K. So really a minimal budget. And of course they're like, so we can get J-Lo and Miley Cyrus and we'll get, no, I don't think so. It's going to have to be a new and developing artist. And of course we make our suggestion like, well, we never heard of them. Yes, you're a 60-year-old marketing executive. You probably haven't heard of these artists, but that's why you come to us. Ask your 14-year-old daughter before you say no. So they agreed to let us bring this artist on. And you and I were talking about working with new artists, and it just reminded me of the story. And I went back and found an old recap slideshow, and I looked at it and went, oh my God, I don't know how we'd ever do this program again in the world of COVID. Tom, just show about 30 seconds of this video. And this is the artist that we got for a few pennies. So I think, Ariana Grande was worth the price, but we look at this as it goes on and we look at how close the fans were like, oh my God, would there be like 85 masks on everyone's faces? Like, will this exist again? Will we ever have this kind of intimacy in music marketing? Thanks, Tom, for showing that. That's good, Tom. Thanks. So I don't know if that'll ever happen again. I don't think the artists will be hugging their fans. What do you think?
It's definitely hard to say now, but I do think that a lot of really incredibly cool game-changing stuff came out of COVID, right? Because to your point, people had to come up with new ways to almost had to recreate their revenue stream or their business model, right? Because, you know, you have artists that tour the world and make tens of millions of dollars a year, but not every artist does it. And some artists are emerging artists during all of this that weren't able to do promo tours or any of the normal stuff they did. So I think we saw some incredibly, you know, innovative stuff where there was the crossover of music and gaming with the, you know, Travis Scott Fortnite concert, which I think was an incredible game changer. And the live stream obviously became a huge thing, and technology then started springing up that also helped innovate within that. So you started seeing different ticketing models, and you saw, you know, different interaction that audiences were able to have within the live streams. And then, you know, now you have electronic, you know, collectibles starting to spring up, and different things like that. So I do think that, you know, for me personally, I've always been a huge champion of new music, and you really hit it, because I also think what was great about 2020 was the fact that you had new artists like a Youngblood who was able to play to an audience that he never would have been able to do in a regular time, because he wouldn't have had probably that many people come to, you know, one of his shows, but because he did it online and virtually, it exploded. So you also got to see, you know, different artists, new artists breaking from this or standing out. I think we saw a huge like virality with music. So TikTok trends and different things that cropped up. Jason Derulo basically becoming a TikTok influencer and reestablishing himself as a completely different entertainer than he has been. So I do think from that perspective, it was very interesting. I think the other thing is that, you know, it also was interesting that you had artists that had never wanted to or considered or had time for brand deals or promotion like this before, and now that they finally had the time, you started seeing people who, you know, were able to do more of the things with brands that they ever had before. And brands also, because they took on more of a social justice voice, or they started redefining the kind of programs they were doing. You saw different artists getting very involved in campaigns that you might not have ever seen before COVID. So there was definitely a lot of challenges and changes, but I think you also saw some really cool trends emerge from all of that.
Yeah, and it's, you know, I think an interesting challenge that we all face in this side of the business is brands, by and large, at least the larger brands, are by their nature risk adverse, right? Because no one wants to be the one that signs off on a program and anything goes wrong or it just doesn't have the impact. So for you and I, when we're having to talk to the brands and saying to some degree, listen, we do this for a living, trust us, we're putting you in good hands. And it's, you know, those two factors, they're hard to align. I mean, we had, and I forget about this, and it's probably one of my favorites, you probably have a similar story. It was a huge national beauty chain, retail. And they called up, we want to get into music. We think that's the place we need to play. And we're so excited to hear that. I'm like, great, awesome. How do we start? And they said, I don't know, how could you kind of indoctrinate us into this world slowly? And they were based in Chicago. And we said, well, why don't we bring an artist to perform? So we'll find an artist on tours in Chicago, and the day before or after, they'll come by your office, bring the employees down to us. You can see the power and the magic of music up front. And they were like, great, we're in. So, you know, we looked at who was coming to Chicago. I saw my buddy Doug Mark representing this one artist. Great, let's put it together. They're like, wow, that's a huge brand. We'd love for them to support us. That's worth us going over there. And we start putting it together, and they're like, oh, wait, so it's going to take an hour and a half. They're going to need transportation. They're going to need a couple of amps. I'm like, it's not a big lift, guys. They're not charging you. They're playing for free. And they're like, oh, and then we have to communicate to all the, they go, you know something? This is like a lot of work for us. And I think we'll just pass. And that was Billie Eilish.
I have had many of those.
Come on, you got to give me one. Come on, tell us.
People passing on my beloved Biebs, you know, Justin Bieber, you know, Katy Perry, you know, also Billie Eilish. You know, we've had so many brands that pass up on things, and I'm like, oh, you know, it's definitely stressful to watch that. But, you know, I think that data and analytics have definitely changed the way brands and consumers are kind of interacting now. And I think technology is also changing how to use the data to interact with them. So for us, we are super data focused. And when you talk about brands being risk adverse, a lot of times, we love to have those conversations because, for a company like ours, being able to identify who the next big artist is it's imperative for us, right? Because we're booking some of those shows and events 6 months to a year in advance, right? So we've had a couple of really incredible partnerships using data. One with a big soda brand, one with a big telco brand, where in the case of the big soda brand, they wanted to partner with new artists, but they wanted to not be so early that they didn't get credit for being associated with that artist. They didn't want to be too late so that they were saying, hey, you need to know about a person that everybody already knows about. So we went so far as to literally predict where on the chart the artist would be when the media ran, because we knew that was about the point where an artist would be breaking into the mainstream and start becoming a household name, right? So we are able to do programs now where we know who the audience is, we know where they're listening, we know what platforms they're engaging on. So when we recommend an artist to a brand, it's not really very risk associated anymore. And again, when you think about radio, having a lot of data is one thing, being able to interpret it is a second, and then what does that all really mean at the end, right? So you could have 50 million streams as an artist, but that doesn't actually mean you're ever going to be a household name. So one benefit that we've had is knowing also who radio in general, not just iHeart, is going to get behind as an artist, because then with all of these different data points that we're looking at and all the different ways that, looking at the KPIs of what a brand is trying to accomplish, we could really put together a program with the right artist on the right platforms and hit the right demo. And there's not really that much risk in it at that point, right? So we've come so far ahead in the ways that we used to do this versus the way we're able to do it now.
Yeah, it's crazy how it's evolved. And we get it from the brand perspective that they're looking for the big hit, they're looking for the association, but there were certain factors. This is, oh my God, 7 years ago for MasterCard. They were already a sponsor of the Grammys, but we're looking for a way to amplify it, and said, how do we talk about our priceless campaign during the Grammys? We said, well, why don't we take an artist and follow them on their Grammy journey? They land in LA, they're running around all week, rehearsals, shopping, and create these priceless moments. So they created all the demographics and stats to match the artist against the audience, so we could come up with the right artist. But of course, our field is limited. It had to be an artist nominated. So, right, and Best Bluegrass Album probably wasn't going to cut it. So it really narrowed the field. And we looked at all the criteria and we said to the brand, all right, so this is it. We just have to match these. And they're like, oh, and we need for them to win the Grammy. Okay, no problem. We'll pick up the phone and it's over there. And finally, I nailed on and decided on Little Big Town. It was their first Grammy nomination ever. And luckily, as you're sitting there with the clients as you're announcing the award, and you're looking up, going, "Come on, man, let's have a good karma." And yeah, they won, but that pressure is not always a lot of fun.
I had my most famous one like that is we did a custom podcast for 23andMe where we had different people talking about various things, and we needed an A-list artist who had an association with type 2, not type 1 diabetes. And for an event in South by Southwest, they had to play a Gibson guitar because we were in the Gibson studio, and they had to be available on a specific date at a specific time and be able to do this whole event. And I literally narrowed it down to Tim McGraw, literally my only choice. So I had to pray very hard, and thankfully, thank you, Tim McGraw, we were able to get it done. But you bring up a great point that it's not, and what's great about that too is it's not about the biggest artist, right? It's about the right artist, and that's what we're finding, because authenticity and when a brand and an artist and their values and their passions and everything else really aligns, that's when you actually have a successful campaign, right? It's not anymore just let's get the biggest artist and pay them $5 million. It's about let's really find the artist that has a true, passion for, association, alignment with, the same values as a brand voice is, and then let's align them, form a partnership, make sure it's authentic, and those always work better. And giving the artist also a little bit more input in the creativity, because they know how to speak to their audience better than anyone does. So we definitely find that it doesn't have to be the biggest artist, it just needs to be the best. And going back to your earlier point of finding those newer artists, nowadays sometimes it's almost better, again, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If it's just a big splash, great, you might still want that A-lister. But in a lot of cases, if you could find that new artist, right, as they're about to break, and you could ride that real wave of success with them and have that organic partnership from the beginning, their fans know it, they know it. The loyalty that you've built now with, again, both the fans and the artist at that point is something you would never be able to create when you come in, at the height of someone's success with a big check. So I do think partnering with new artists can actually be a better way for people to go sometimes.
Got it. So for some reason, the one question we have is up there is from Anonymous. So that's a weird name to name your kid, but go figure. And the question is, but it's a good question, which is, I guess, to both of us, which is, what tools from a data perspective? Well, I guess the first part of the question is to you, do you use tools outside of iHeart tools, data tools, when doing what you do?
Yes, we do. And we actually have our own proprietary data, but we have a lot of partner companies we work with as well. But we actually have one company that we're partnered with that I'm actually really excited about. This is something new that we've created. It's called Smart Audio. We've been doing it for a couple of years with brands, but we're able to literally go out and specifically target people that have engaged with an artist on their social platforms. We know who they are, male, female, what age, what device they're tuning in on. So we're starting to be able to use not just our own data, which obviously we have a lot of with our registered users in iHeartRadio, but also partnering with other companies where we can get those deeper insights into the listeners and the consumers, so that we can use those to balance out the insights that we have internally as well.
Yeah, it's funny, again, dating myself, going back to the 90s when I had with my partner's music marketing network, we put 50 million bounce back cards and CDs, and we would take that data, hand enter it, and that would be our research. We would sell to brands before it went online. And then NPD kind of had the market for a long time. Then they sold the music research, and then we would use Q scores, which were more for celebrities, but some of them would cross over to artists. So there was never anyone, then Sony Music, they gave us their own research, but of course that was geared to those artists. So there's been and then these new tools that have come up. And of course now it's just tell me how many TikTok followers they have, and that becomes the benchmark. So it's, I don't know, there's not one standard, I guess, is the bottom line.
That's true. And you're right. I mean, even within our company or outside our company, I think there's still different data points or have different levels of importance to everybody as they're weighing it. I mean, it's been such an evolution of data in the last couple of years. I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out exactly how to measure each one. And then it's a personal opinion for most people on which one is the one that they value the most, or what combination of data do they value the most.
Yeah, for sure. So, it was interesting as Tom was reading your bio, which I would have thought I would have had memorized by now. I couldn't believe how many of the nonprofit pieces were there. I mean, your wine dinners, your City of Hope dinners were epic. I just read the news about Musicians on Call, and we were actually their agency doing their PR 4 or 5 years ago. And of course, you and I met at a TJ Martell event. So the charity stuff is amazing from two perspectives. One is just personally that you and I are both aligned that, it's great to make a living and have any kind of success, but you have to give back to, and you give back to, more causes than anyone I know. And then look, there is a business side to it. We do it for the good, but the relationships and the people you meet, and that's how we met. But it is also just such a great tool when it's organic for artists. And I look from the beginning, this was, I still have a email when our Advil client said, "Oh, I know who'd be great to do a commercial. Why don't we get Bon Jovi?" And I still have the email from CAA going, "Never, ever, ever will he do an Advil commercial." And I got the deal done by aligning with his charity and appealing to his, sensibility for the restaurant he's got in Red Bank. And if you can't afford your meal, you can do the dishes, or, and that's how it began. And then 4 weeks ago, I have this great artist, Kendra Erica, who had a song of Hope, and we needed a good partner. We went to War Child, and they said, "Wow, this aligns with us. Let's blast it out to all our people." So it's a marketing vehicle, yet it's helping and doing good. And for you and I, it's become part of our DNA. So why have you, my God, you've associated, you don't stop with so many different organizations. How do you do it?
It's kind of interesting, the history of it all. I've been around a long time, and I've done some cool things, to your point, professionally, but I joke that I think my legacy will actually be the charity work. And I have to mention Steve Bartles, Richard Palmisi, Charles Goldstuck. My initial beginnings of the charity work started with Charles Goldstuck being honored for City of Hope. And they asked me to be part of the committee. And when I entered the room, I looked around, and it was all presidents of companies. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so intimidated. This is such an important room. How am I going to ever keep up with these people? And I left the meeting that day, and I went back to the office, and I was like, wow, I better get really creative about, how I'm going to raise money. And I happened to run into one of the salespeople in the kitchen, and she was saying that one of the big car companies was looking to get their car into a music video. And I said, oh my God, okay, wait, I might be able to get one of these, important people on this committee to get an artist to do this, and maybe we do it for the charity instead. And so, make a long story short, by the time I came back to the next meeting, a lot of those guys had sold 1 or 2 tables, and I had gotten, a car company to donate a car. I had gotten an artist to donate, the proceeds of their show. And I had done all these things. And what I realized coming out of that was, it's not about whether you could write a huge check. I think the thing about charity that's very intimidating is people are like, what can one person do, or what can I do? And it's very subjective, obviously, about what you're passionate about. But what I learned during that initial process was that just being creative and putting heart and putting time into it, I ended up raising more money than anybody on the committee, and I got nominated as the youngest board member ever to City of Hope. And because I was a marketing person, and because I was already doing all these other things, I started getting, again, it wasn't for me about I could write a gigantic personal check. So I kept just creating really interesting opportunities that would raise money for these charities that were very easy for me to do within my normal professional day, and were also really beneficial and interesting to the artists that were a part of it. So then people started coming and noticing and saying, hey, why don't you be on this board? And I really enjoyed it and loved it. And it's been a great passion of mine, because we do a lot of cool things in the music industry, but when you realize the impact of what you're really giving back to the world, or how you're really literally saving a life at any given time, there's really no deal you could do with a brand that's going to be more impactful than that, right? So I think it's been a thing, and it's become a part of my everyday, regular job. I'm always trying to include some kind of charity element into whatever it is I'm doing.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting, because as we look back at how these things unfold, again, back to Family Day, which is how we met, it used to raise like $100,000 a year in the beginning. And then when I took it over, we were raising $1 million an event. And people are like, well, what is the secret? I said, secret is very simple. It's the committee. It's all of my friends and relationships in the music business, many who are on here now. That committee, they do the heavy lifting, and they're amazing. And they're like, but, well, we all form committees, and then no one shows up. I said, okay, that's right. Everyone go, oh, I agree, I'll sign up. And then they're not there. And they said, what was the secret sauce? I said, honestly, we would have our meetings like 5 o'clock on a Thursday, and we'd spend 45 minutes going through the business and how we're going to raise the money, how we're going to get more auction items and artists. And then I would just bring in some beer and wine when it was done. And next thing you know, everyone's making deals. Everyone's catching up. Everyone's like, we got to do. And literally, I was watching deals being made at every meeting. People are like done with the cause, and then they move. And I don't think that was a bad thing. I didn't feel bad because that's why they showed up. And that's why we raised $6 million for cancer research. So I think the personal and relationship part and the part of getting it done, they're all kind of one.
Yeah, I think you and I always talk about this too, because we are so charity involved. I always tell people when they ask me, especially about networking, that I didn't get into it because I thought I was going to meet important people and it was going to lead to big deals. That was never actually the intention, but it was incredible throughout my career where I would have relationships with people that my bosses at the time probably couldn't get on the phone, but I had incredible relationships with. I was able to impress them with the way that I was able to, perform on a charity thing when they never would have on a day-to-day basis seen what my actual professional skills were. And so it goes back to what you and I always talk about, which is if you just do the right thing, a lot of times the rest just kind of follows, right? So you go in with the right intent and sometimes something good just comes back out of that.
Yeah, it bleeds into relationships. And you and I have always talked about that. And you can tell, we look at the chat room and the whole music business is still about relationships. I think there's the new younger guard that we don't know as much that are coming up. It's most of us who've, been there, since the glory days and how important it is. And if we were in the same room, you'd start to kick me and go, shut up, but you can't. So, but I have to say that, when Alyssa and I met after that, we just became such fast friends. And yeah, we did a deal with Def Jam with one of our clients for like 20 grand, like nothing. But this young lady here is the one that I can call anytime, 24 hours a day, ask for anything, Jingle Ball tickets the day before the show, whatever. And she always, always, always comes through. And I cannot say that about all the relationships I have in the business, but there is no one better than Alyssa. Someone just said she's got the biggest heart there is. And you ask for nothing back, you never expect anything back, and yet it all comes back because that's how you operate as a person. And I think, that relationship part of the business, it saved me so many times. And I told you the story I'm with, who cares? No one's gonna know. Virtual NDA for everyone. We're with Kings of Leon in the middle of a field shooting a music video. I've got my Kodak clients, when that was a business, on the ground. And their lawyer just decides to not be a nice guy and go, I want half the fee wired to the bank in the next 3 hours or we're shutting it down. And I've got 30 of the people on my company freaking out. Kodaks are big. The whole world's falling apart. And I'm talking to the label and they're like, well, that's the lawyer for the, I go, who is God in your office? Who has the voice of thunder? And they're like, Tom Corson. And I call up Tom, walks out of the meeting, picks up the phone. What do you need, Marcus? And it was done. That's everything. Without that, if we don't have those relationships, then we're not doing our job.
I think the number one most important thing to actually survive and succeed in the music business is to have good relationships, and foster that and appreciate it and be loyal and do the right thing. And, it's so important. I see so many people miss that, right? And they care about the short win instead of the long-term value of the relationship. I also think people undervalue to your point, the power of those relationships, right? Like I had one of those where we had a huge event with AT&T and the band that was supposed to perform got sick that day. And it was such an important thing for us. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I will say names because he's one of my favorite people in the industry, but I called Andy Grammer and his team, and he was on a plane within an hour, flew to Dallas, did this event for, way below fee, just because, he was a good partner and somebody that I had shown loyalty to at the very beginning of his career. And then there he was paying it back, right? So when you have those moments that, you realize that, wow, this person really just came through for me in that way. It's, again, that's another thing that's priceless, is when you have those moments.
No, Andy is great. I was sitting at a S-Curve marketing meeting, helping them with brand partnerships, but so many people in the room we couldn't see, and see a voice pipes up, starts giving an idea. I said, that's a cool idea. He goes, thanks. And I go, I'm sorry. He goes, I'm Andy. Right? He's like a regular person, right? He just doesn't have that artist ego, which is amazing. Hey, Alyssa, so there's 4 questions in the Q&A. I think most of them are aimed to you, and they're pretty technical. Do you want to take a peek and pick one? Can you see them?
I didn't happen to see what they were, but because if you want to show me what they were or tell me what they were.
Let's see. Well, there's a lot here.
They're all going quickly. That's why I don't know if I missed some of the actual.
I mean, one was just in the age of new media, what are the best channels for new artists to grow? And one is, what are the opportunities with digital versus terrestrial? So either one makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of differences between digital and terrestrial. I mean, obviously the social platforms I think are very important because I think that's almost leveled the playing field and it's given people the ability to grow their audience, build their brand, and do really creative content and stand out in a way that didn't exist when digital didn't exist, right? But radio, on the other hand, I think is definitely that place that is very much about, you know, you can have a lot of streams, but it's, I always ask people to name an artist that's a household name without having at least that one radio hit, right? So I do think radio is definitely a place where we take somebody who's emerging and we blow them up into a household name or into the mainstream. But we as a company, and you know, I think a lot of the different companies out there have their own versions of this. I think all of the radio companies obviously also have digital extensions and platforms, right? So there's really nothing we can't do with a new artist. And so when, you know, we can always do social content, digital content, and any kind of marketing thing that makes sense. And then obviously in other cases, there's full-blown on-air opportunities as well. But I think it is important for new artists to focus on growing that fan base because it is something that a lot of people look at, and it's something that can help you monetize your business early on. I don't know if I've answered that totally in the way that you guys were looking for, but I do think that radio and digital both serve 2 very specific things. And last point I guess I would make is, you know, radio is almost like, or I should say streaming is more like the record store of today. So where you used to hear a song on radio and you would go buy it in the record store, now it's still a place of discovery where people will go and, you know, stream it on one of the platforms or add it to their collection on one of their digital platforms.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's so hard not to think about, you know, the old days. And every time I'd walk into Jason Flom's office, there'd be a kid outside his office on the phones, always on the phone, never getting off the phone. I'm like, Jason, what is that? It's not your assistant. What's this kid doing? He calls record stores. I have him call 300 record stores a day to find some new artist that's selling that we don't know about yet. But now the artist discovery tools, now it's just what's on TikTok, what's organically growing. It's so changed. I mean, how is that?
Yeah, I also think an important point that I kind of left out was that I also think radio itself has benefited from the technology boom. So, you know, whereas some people think of us, and I think we're undervalued or underestimated in this way, is that radio isn't just something you turn on in the car or that you have in your, you know, in your AM FM clock radio or anything. Radio is now on so many various platforms, right? So when we launched iHeartRadio, that wasn't to replace terrestrial radio. That was so that our brands had an extension and you can listen to our personalities or our stations on whatever platform you wanted to, right? So we've gone out, and radio all over has gone out and made partnerships with platforms of the smart speakers, the smart TVs. You know, there's hundreds of different platforms and thousands of devices that people can actually hear radio on now. So I think, you know, traditional terrestrial radio versus radio as a whole and where that is, they're a lot closer than people think in terms of separating radio from digital, because radio kind of is digital now. And I think the other thing is that we're very much seeing a huge boom in audio in general. Podcasting is a massive place for us. And what we're finding is that people are so overloaded with their eyeballs every day, consuming different content on their phone and online, that now they're starting to use radio and audio as to fill in those spaces. So like when they're cooking or they're working at home or they're driving, or frankly, when people are stressed out nowadays and having trouble sleeping, they're turning to podcasts or they're turning to that audio to be able to help them fall asleep. So I think there's an interesting intersection of all of both radio and digital. It kind of intersects more than I think people give it credit for.
Yeah, it's true. And I think you made a great point about accessibility, because, back in the day, it would be like driving out to Long Island. Oh, I'm losing the signal for C100. And, you're having to find another station. And now in the course of like 2 months, I remember a few years back, I was at the Cannes Lions. So I'm in France, and I find that taking a cab, there's this jazz station, just French jazz. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to. Now I have it. So we represented as an agency TuneIn. So now I'm like, I can listen to that anytime. And then I couldn't believe my son had a show on his college radio station at WashU. I could tune into that. So now, I went to school in Albany. Oh my God, CDB, I want to learn QBK. You now have access wherever you are. So I think that's been a game changer. And iHeart was kind of at the beginning of that, to really allow that access.
Yeah, definitely agree on that.
And it's also, I think, to some degree, the personalities, right? People feel they know the DJs, and they're trusted, and when they're playing new music, and
my favorite story. Yeah, my favorite story about that is Ryan Seacrest will always talk about how when he's walking around with another huge celebrity, people will walk up to him and go, "Oh my God, Ryan, can you take my picture?" Because even though Ryan himself is a celebrity, they think of him as their friend, that guy they hear on the radio. Radio is definitely that companion in the car. They're a friend and someone you trust. And I think that's why music discovery on radio is still such a big thing in the #1 places, because it's more like your friend is recommending a song to you, and people have a deeper trust in what radio is playing because they know a lot of thought and care when picking those songs. So I definitely think that that's always been what has differentiated radio from any other platform, is that the personalities provide a companionship and a comfort and a connection that really no other platform has managed to do yet.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of amazing that they, and then you've seen kind of people with their careers. There are radio people that have gone to Spotify, and then there were Spotify people who've gone to Penta. It seems this, look, it's great that there's new opportunities, because the music business is not what it was. And so certain positions and jobs that used to be so prominent, including radio promotion, have diminished. And yet all of these digital opportunities have, really come up. But have you had a group of people that have been with you at iHeart? So I can't imagine anyone's been there 27 years, but how is that morphed with the people you've worked with every day?
Well, it's kind of funny that you asked that, because I love to tell the story about being in Tom Pullman's first music meeting ever at Z100 24 years ago, give or take. Most of the people on my team have, I think the shortest is usually around 10 years, if not 15. I have been so fortunate in that so many of the people that I've worked with, a lot of our brand managers, a lot of the program directors in our company have been friends since I was an intern, 27 years ago. And that, to me, that's been the hardest thing of ever thinking about leaving for another job or taking another opportunity, has been, how do you possibly recreate the relationships and the people and the trust and the experiences that you've had with these people over decades, right? And be able to grow with them and learn with them and experience it. So I've actually oddly been fortunate in that many of the people I've worked with are 20 plus or 15 plus, but I think that's very rare, especially in today's world. Whenever I'm hiring, I look at resumes and I'm like, wow, this person's like left almost every year. And that's such an interesting concept to me, because I have gone such a different route with my career. And I know I've been lucky with that, but it is a thing for me, because I do think investing in the place that you're at is kind of an important thing, and not always be looking for the next thing all the time.
Yeah, and I think it's also, and we'll wrap it up in a minute. It's also just a function of, there never used to be, there used to be people looking for jobs. And now there's these things called informational interviews, right? People like, I'm not looking for a job. I just want to talk to you. Most of the young people who are, coming out of school and look, Tom does this for a living, who are looking for career advice, looking to get into the business, but just don't know really where to go. So you and I run across them, and it's friends and family, and you sit with them, and they usually end up with the same last question, which is, what overall advice would you give me? As I'm starting out in my career, what do you say? And I'd be shocked if you and I differ on this. You'll probably just have a different version. And I'll always say, but you've said this to me, just take the high road every single time. Do what's right, do the good thing. It might hurt at the moment, and you might have to bite your tongue and say, I let someone cut the line in front of me. Just keep doing it. In the long run, you're always going to win. But
Sorry.
let's hear your version of that.
I 1,000,000% agree with that. But I actually was having a conversation the other day where somebody said something to me that really hit home, which is, comparison is a thief of joy. And if you compare yourself to other people, every time you're going to come up short, versus if you embrace who you are, you're always going to win. And I think that I admittedly am a very unique person. I have a unique approach. I have a quirky personality. And I think that, I say to people, especially when people ask me, whether it's interns or people getting into the business, I'm like, don't look over at what everyone else is doing, because everyone is going to have a different trajectory in their career. Not everyone's going to shoot to the top. Some people are going to grow slower, but they'll grow higher. So I think it's very important for people to not keep looking at the bigger title or the more money or what their friend is doing or what's going on over there, and focus on what's making them happy and what their career trajectory is and where they're looking to go. Because when you just are true to yourself and you just stick to your path and your success, it's a better way to win every time.
Absolutely. Well, I think, Alyssa, you're on LinkedIn, obviously, right, before I open my mouth. So Alyssa and I are both on LinkedIn. I see, sorry, we missed the party in the chat room. We'll take a look later. People are just there having martinis.
Hey, everybody, and I do want to sincerely thank all of the friends who are here right now. So thank you all for joining and being a part of this.
And I love it because so many people that we saw connected just never made the connection and went, oh, wait, I love Alyssa, I love Marcus, and it just came because of this great platform, which we love. So it means so much to us that everyone joined. So thank you, everyone. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. And Tom, you want to take it away with the closing words?
Well, thank you very much, Marcus. And Alyssa, this has been fabulous. We got a great glimpse into one of the many reasons why you've been so successful. You're a rock star in every sense of the word, and we appreciate what you do for the industry and for all the causes that you celebrate and support. So please keep doing it. I have to say one thing, though. You've been there for 27 years. You look like you must have started when you were 12.
Obviously.
Crazy. Must be that beach living as I'm looking over your shoulder there. But nonetheless, to the audience, thank you. We appreciate you continuing to support this platform. I put in the chat earlier, we have 3 more stellar pairings next week on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I hope you'll tune in. And with that, I'm going to close it out simply by saying, be nice to each other, get a shot, but keep wearing that mask. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.